you know, nowadays you can steal something and nobody do anything, but if you say, I think he's a bit of a tosser, then you probably go to jail for 10 years. We say that's going to end now. David Spencer is the... Everybody's got a long title today. David Spencer is the head of crime and justice at Policy Exchange and a former Met detective. David Spencer, good morning, sir. How are you?
Morning, Jeremy. Very well. Thanks very much for having me on.
Pleasure. I would say about time too, but I like the way the Met sort of slunk that out on the back of Graham Linehan. What a ludicrous country we live in, my friend. This is a person who's always had respect from the police. You know, when I was growing up, you know, men and women, policemen and women were on the streets getting intel, you know, leading to you feeling that they were actually, I don't know, arresting criminals. Now, they don't do that, and they have been spending their time, I don't know, since COVID, arresting people for no bloody reason whatsoever. It's madness, isn't it?
Well, these non-crime hate incidents, as they're called, is something that we at Policy Exchange have been writing about for quite a while. Last year, we published a pretty major report about them. And I think one of the interesting things that we need to note here about the Met Police's stance is what they're saying here, and the language is important. What they're saying that they're not going to continue investigating these non-crime hate incidents, but what they are going to do is continue recording them. So what it means essentially is, yes, they're not going to be spending loads of time investigating them. That's a good thing. They can get on with investigating actual crime like shoplifting and theft and robbery and these sorts of...
No, not genuine crime. Surely not.
So they can do that, but the reality is that when they're recording them, that still has a really chilling effect on free speech. Because as an example, what you can see is that a non-crime hate incident gets recorded against you. You then go for a job, you do a DBS check, gets done, and then that information can get provided.
I think it's a really, really important point to make, and one that Blexley made earlier. It could be this is window dressing on the back of the Linehan case to say we're not going to investigate, but we do need to warn everybody. You're absolutely spot on, David. This will be recorded, and there will be somewhere in the ether of the world, it will be recorded that you have indeed been warned about this. And Graham Linehan has backed this up this morning by saying he wants that recording banned as well. Will that happen? Can it happen? Should it happen?
Well, that's what one of our recommendations with Policy Exchange last year. That's exactly what we've said. The whole scheme needs to be completely abolished. The reality is that there is legislation and there is regulations set by the Home Office. Now, the Home Office have been reviewing and looking at this for quite some time, probably about a year since they promised they were looking at it. It seems that, to be honest, it's been kicked into the long grass, and government needs to look at this. But actually what we need to see as well is every other police force and the College of Policing following the Met's lead, saying we're not going to investigate this stuff, but actually we're going to go further. We're not going to record any of this stuff anymore. But
why is it? Explain to me. You do a proper job, and you've quite rightly been pushing for this to happen. There are so many examples, and I'm not just pushing talk as the home of common sense, right? But there's so many things on a daily basis that we talk about on this station that make no bloody sense to the average person. The ludicrous decisions. Why? How is it right that the police forces in this country that are supposed to protect the inhabitants of this country against people who commit crimes are not doing that? I mean, the Lucy Connolly is a great example. I'm not condoning her words, but we'll spend time arresting these people. The guy from Times Radio that was dragged out of his house for daring on WhatsApp to criticise a teacher. 5 armed police. It's beyond comprehension to me. How have we got to this position, David?
But the thing is, well, there are cases even more even more ridiculous. Like, so, for example, I'm looking at one now. Police recorded a non-crime hate incident which was reported to them because a couple had been thrown out of a pub for having sex in the toilet. The couple were transgender, apparently, so they recorded that as a non-crime hate incident. Another one, a man got on a bus and he alleged that other passengers were giving him funny looks because of his skin colour. You know, when the Chief Inspector of Constabulary looked at the recording of non-crime hate incidents a year or so ago, they found that 25% of the ones recorded by the police were wrongly recorded. So, you know, they are getting this completely wrong. In terms of where this comes from, I think we need to look at some of the ideologies that have taken hold in policing and across the criminal justice justice system, and particularly what I've described as the progressivist ideology. So the prioritising of identity politics and identity over actually what's happening. So characteristics over circumstance, as some people have described it. I think that's the problem, is that what we're seeing is a prioritization of those sorts of issues over actually dealing with what's happened and what the crime is.
And I think it would be very interesting if the police began to understand entirely how frustrated and angry people are. I think the Policy Exchange does great work here. Maybe the Mets, maybe it's just window dressing, maybe they'll be followed, but maybe we should look at it as the first step towards some sort of common sense in the long run. David Spencer, thank you very much indeed. I'm just sat here doing Morning Glory thinking non-crime hates, and then he told the story about the bus. You'll love this, Christian. You'll love this, boys. It takes me back to the Victoria Wood sketch. She said, you can sum up Britain brilliantly, you know. Think about it. The Spanish have flamenco dancing, the Italians have opera. She said, I got on a bus once. It was an English bus, and I sat at the top, and two people started having sex, but because it was an English bus, nobody said a word, just everybody looked at the floor. And when they'd finished having sex on the bus, the bloke sat up and lit up a cigarette, and three people stood up and said, I think you'll find this is a non-smoking bus. That sums up the United Kingdom. Good morning, this is Talk.